there's a part of you that knows exactly why you were born, why your soul came back from past lives, what you're doing, why you're here, and how to get there. The chart is only as relevant as it gets me to your soul. It's like a scope. In my course of my life, I've delivered hundreds, maybe even thousands of readings without mentioning a sign or a planet or a house.
This podcast episode is sponsored by Astrology Hub's Academy. Wherever you are on your astrology journey, we have a class that will help you get to the next level.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast. I'm so excited and happy and honored that you've decided to join us here today to listen to a very interesting conversation that we're going to have with astrologer, teacher, author, Mark Borax. And he uses astrology to explore the soul. So we're going to have a very interesting conversation around soul and astrology. And I was recommended, there's people in my life that when they reach out to me and they say, you need to talk to this person, I really pay attention because I know them. I know that they are aligned with what we're doing. And so I have a friend that I've known for a very long time. Her name is Sue. And she said, Amanda, you've got to talk to Mark. You have to talk to Mark. She was so insistent upon this that I then went and looked at Mark's work and it was really resonating on so many levels. I was like, okay, let's do this. So I'm really very excited to introduce you to Mark. And Mark, welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast for your Astrology Hub debut.
Thank you, Amanda. It's great to be here.
All right. So a little bit about Mark. He has been a nomadic poet his whole life. In the late 70s, he traveled the United States and Canada performing and selling his poetry. In the mid 80s, Mark was befriended by his adolescent idol, Ray Bradbury, who became his literary godfather. I love that. He's the author of the book 2012, Crossing the Bridge to the Future. And this is a story about his first astrology mentor, as I believe it. And then also a book called The Cosmic Weather Report that explores how to turn the strange changes of our times, how to navigate them. And then now he has just released another book called The Ruby Heart of the Dragon. He created soul level astrology in 1987 as a way to identify the core nature of human beings. I mean, amazing work, Mark. And really, like, what more could we be doing here besides trying to figure out who we are and what we're here to do and to contribute and all those good things. So thank you for dedicating your life to that exploration.
You're so welcome, Amanda.
All right. So let's start with this question that I love to ask new guests on our platform, which is, how did you get into astrology? What's the story behind your path to what you're doing here today?
Well, I always knew the signs of all my family and friends growing up. And I didn't realize this till hindsight, till looking back. But I didn't really either believe in astrology or disbelieve it until I was on my 25th birthday in Ashland, Oregon. My girlfriend at the time said, I want to give you a surprise birthday present. Come with me. And she drove me to this house and she rang the doorbell. And a woman answered, and my friend said, here, congratulations. Here's your first astrology reading for your 25th birthday. Go to it. And then she got in the car and drove away and left me with this woman who spoke for 2 hours. And the first thing she said, looking at my chart, was, I could sum you up in 2 words. And I said, okay, what? And she said, communication and relationships. And I was hooked. Because that was my whole life. I was writing my whole life and I was always chasing the goddess, always trying to make love work, using all my poetry and cosmic desire. And then this woman spoke for 2 hours about parts of me that no one else even knew about. And from that moment on, I said, there's got to be something to this. And then another birthday, it must have been my 29th birthday, another girlfriend gave me my first astrology book. She said, I think you're going to like this book. And it was Alan Oken's As Above, So Below, Alan Oken's Complete Astrology. I spent 4 years studying that book before I ever took an astrology class or a lecture. There wasn't any internet, so to speak, of at that time, but I just studied my own chart for 4 years and I read that book. And at the end of those 4 years, I thought, I might be able to do this for a living. So all those years, it was just a passion. And just when I was finishing the book, I said, yeah, I was working in comic books, but my writing wasn't making it through so much. I was kind of sidetracked into editorial work, and I was craving something that had meaning. And right at that point, I got another reading by a master astrologer, Elias Lonsdale, and blew me out of the water. And he ended up being my teacher. He started a mystery school. I apprenticed with him for 7 years, and he taught a whole other astrology that led me to discover my own take on astrology, which I just poured into the current book.
Okay. I would love to hear. Well, first of all, I need to do a little reflection. Number one, I have heard from so many men that a woman is either the reason why they started getting into astrology because they wanted to figure out how to connect with her, or a woman nudged them. So you got a little bit more than a nudge, but I just want to say that because all of you women out there, you are like in a position to really open up a world a lot of times. And I hear this story a lot. And sometimes I think we don't realize how influential we can be. So I just wanted to just mention that. And then number two, the power of that reading, to completely shift your perspective on astrology, but probably also on yourself. Is that true? Like, did you have insights about yourself that changed everything?
This was more like an ayahuasca journey than a reading. I mean, at the end of those 90 minutes, I went outside and found out that my body was soaking wet because I'd been crying and I didn't even know it. This was not just an information exchange. This was a life-changing experience. And as it wore off outdoors, I said, I need to learn to do for other people what this guy just did for me.
Like full body chills. That's amazing. The power of a incredibly facilitated reading to literally change a trajectory of life. And I'm saying this from personal experience because I have the same experience. I mean, we're here because of my first experience with an astrology reading. And I know a lot of people in the community feel the same way. I know that soul is a big piece of your work. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you would consider your unique approach to astrology?
Yeah. Unlike some other kinds of astrology and counseling, I don't feel like I'm the one who knows who you are, who you should be, and what you should do. But I do feel that there's a part of you that knows that, which I call the soul or the core nature. It really doesn't even matter to me what you call it, but it's that part of you that knows exactly why you were born, why your soul came back from past lives, what you're doing, why you're here, and how to get there. But like most human beings, few of us are always in constant contact with that deeper part. Usually we're intermittently, at best, in contact with that part because we have a lot of conditioned layers of how we were taught to believe and behave. So I feel my job is to paint in words a verbal portrait of how I see your inner nature. And if that resonates with you, then your inner nature is going to say the same thing. And I'm on the outside of you. So your ego is really sandwiched. It doesn't really have a chance if I'm really getting to the core part of you.
I love that. Your ego and you are sandwiching the soul, basically saying, this is the truth. This is your truth. What do you say to people who feel nervous when they come to you? I've noticed that there's a lot of like, oh no, are you going to tell me something bad? Or, oh no, are you going to tell me something that I don't want to know?
I think that it's kind of a good nervousness because they sense, especially if they've been following my work, which the majority of my clients at this point have either read my books or they get my monthly newsletter or they've taken classes or seen podcasts. So they kind of have a feel for me and where I'm coming from. And I think they also feel that in order to read somebody, I can't do it like a professor sitting back from them. I have to fall in love with them. I have to fall in love with something in their chart, in their soul. And when people get nervous coming to see me, I kind of look at it as it's really meaningful to them. They're sensing that this might change their life. And yeah, it's going to reveal parts of their shadow. But even when I'm going deep into their most darkest places, I'm holding the light of an unconditional acceptance.
That's huge. And people can feel that. Okay. So I'd love to ask you a question about the soul, because it was recently brought to my attention that maybe humans don't have a soul, and that concept is not true or accurate. So first of all, what do you think about that? And second of all, how does astrology shape your perspective of the human soul?
Well, talking about the human soul often leads me to talk about synchronicities. Like if there was no higher force, if there was no deeper force, if there was no grand design, my life could have never made it to the point that it's made it at. And so, I mean, for one example, my teacher, Elias Lonsdale, who I ended up apprenticing with, I found out shortly after meeting him that we both began life in Queens, New York, and then we moved to Northern Vermont, and then we moved to Willamette Valley, Oregon, and then we moved to Bay Area, California, and then we moved to Santa Cruz, where we met.
Whoa.
And so that's one of many, some of which I go into in the book, especially the Sagittarius chapter. That's one of many synchronicities that even if I didn't feel there was a soul or a greater power, it'd be hard to feel that way after those kinds of things keep happening. Secondly, I understand somebody like that person you were talking about, because it's hard to look at the world out there today and look really deeply into it and feel there is a God, there are angels, there are higher powers, there is a grand design. I can understand somebody kind of collapsing into nihilism. I have a lot of compassion for people who feel that way, but I think it's also sad, because for me, the soul is that part of you that's been here before in other lives. And this is a new life. So it has to find out all over again what everything is. Your body's never been here before. But even if a deep part of you has been coming back in life after life, it's on an arc. It's on a creative trajectory of how to bring your creativity and your love out through the vessel of your personhood into this world. And that's how I see the soul.
Beautiful. And where do you see astrology playing in with this? Like when you look at someone's chart and when you're looking at people's lives and stories, how does that confirm or not this concept of soul for you?
I think I'm probably less infatuated with the chart itself than most astrologers, because for me, the chart is only as relevant as it gets me to your soul. It's like a scope. If I can get to your soul, I don't care that much about the chart. This is why in my course of my life, I've delivered hundreds, maybe even thousands of readings without mentioning a sign or a planet or a house. I just want to talk about you. Some people want to hear me teach them astrology, and I'm happy to talk about quincunx and Mars and the eighth house. But other people, they just want a soul boost. They want me to paint a picture of their optimal destiny. And for me, the chart is the scope. It's not the be all and end all.
I love that. Why do you think that we come here and forget? Like, why is that the design?
Because unless we gave ourselves a certain amount of amnesia, it would be like we were always peaking on ayahuasca or LSD. If you take the highest moment where you're expanding into the glory, into the interconnected glory of all things, like mass humanity did in the 1960s. I was very much a part of that movement. I was just old enough in the 1960s. And the beauty of that is staggering, but you'd never be able to contact all the other people in the world who need your love, your awareness, your enlightenment. If all you did was remain in that state of full awareness and not have any amnesia, you'd be you'd be soaring with the angels, but you wouldn't have a lot of contact with all the people who need you. I think we need a sufficient amount of amnesia, but we carry it way too far. We don't have to forget to the extent that we do. And that extent gets reinforced with mainstream media and public education and false diet and ego and the craziness of our time. So there's a lot of support for forgetting, and there's not as much support for remembering. And that's what I help people do.
Yes, I love that. That's great. That's what we help people do too. So, all right. You recently wrote a book called The Ruby Heart of the Dragon. This is an awesome title. What does that mean?
Well, it has to do with the north and south nodes of the moon, the karmic points of your origin and your destiny. Arabian astrologers came up with colorful names. They called the south node of the moon the dragon's tail, and they called the north node of the moon the dragon's head. And so the dragon's tail indicates where you've been in past lives. The dragon's head indicates your optimal destiny in this life. So I was thinking of redoing the sun signs, and I realized that between the dragon's tail and the dragon's head, I can envision your sun. That would be the heart of the dragon. And then it got to a ruby heart, because the book is designed to ignite your inner knowing like a ruby ignites a laser beam. Lasers come from rubies. And so when I ignite the core part of your love and creativity and your higher knowing, it shines that beam out from the dragon's heart and enables you to deal with the leftover issues of the past in your shadow in order to be able to clear the way ahead for the future.
Okay. And what's the focus of the book?
I completely redo the 12 sun signs. I introduce the reader into each sign as if it was this fascinating country. I describe its dangers and its blessings and its perils. And I write in a very easy to read, but multi-leveled, multi-textured way, because those are the kind of books that I love. I'm also a songwriter and a poet. And then at the end of each chapter, I have 2 pages on what it would mean to have that sign as your dragon's tail or your dragon's head.
So that's exploring the nodal axis. Yeah.
That's right.
So, Mark, what inspired you to write this? I mean, there's books that talk about zodiac signs already. Like I know your unique take on the zodiac. Was there like a guiding thought or a guiding person you were speaking to as you were going through the zodiac signs?
That's also a really good question. I kept little sticky notes on my computer where I came up with the names of all the people that I knew best in each sign. And I was psychically tuning my words through all those years. I'm a crazy perfectionist when it comes to writing. I think few writers go through as many drafts as I do. And so as I was going through that, I would try it on and say, well, that thing that I just wrote seems to really fit my Capricorn friend, Stefan, but it doesn't seem to fit Allison. Let me see if I can tune it. So I kind of psychically tuned in to the people I knew, and I tried to get through every cliche, whether it was an astrological cliche or one of my own. In my first draft, I said, I have to start out saying something about each of the 12 signs that I've never said before. And that itself took a long time, but that got something really fresh. And from then on, I just had to use both my writing art and my astrology art to the max, like far beyond where I'd ever taken it before. It was like a shamanic journey because the signs kept morphing and I was like having to catch up with them.
Wow. Interesting. One of the things you said before we went on live, you asked me what my sun sign was. And I said, Capricorn. And he said, ooh, you're going to love what I have to say about Capricorn. And I went, wow. And that's a first, because normally when I read about Capricorn, and I think this is one of the reasons why I was never really interested in astrology, is because I would read these things that were like, oh God, is that really me? Like that's kind of that I don't want to identify with that version of what they're saying I am. So tell us a little bit about how you're reframing some of what you think as misconceptions or ideas that may or may not be true about the signs.
Well, it's understandable that you would feel that way, especially being a Capricorn, because many years ago I noted there were two sun signs who, whenever they came to me for readings, is tiptoed in the room and like skirted the walls like a cat as far away from me as they could go before they sat down. And it was Capricorn and Scorpio. And I think when most astrologers are delivering readings to Capricorn or Scorpio, they're really projecting their disowned shadow on you. They're not talking about you. With Capricorn, they're talking about power, the part of power that they've never owned. And with Scorpio, they're talking about sex, the part of sexuality they've never owned. And because most people haven't dealt with those things, I think they're seeing a false shadow of their own disowned projections. And I blew those cliches apart with both Scorpio and Capricorn. Plus, I delivered a version of Virgo that no one in the world has ever even thought of before, because I thought that was the most misplaced sign in terms of most astrologers.
I was going to say Virgo too. I feel like Virgo gets a pretty bad rap. And we definitely don't need more proliferation of things that make people feel bad about themselves, or put them in a box that feels constrained and brings out the things about them that they may not really like. Doubles down on that, so thank you for taking on that work.
I feel that we need to give people something to live for now, especially the younger generations, because there's a bleak landscape out there in the world today, which threatens the bright future that we started to create in the 1960s with All You Need Is Love. To look into another human being and find what wants to blossom, what wants to grow, what version of you is yearning to break out of the disguise, to break out of the conditioned layers. All my work is predicated upon that. I help people find something good to live for. And when I wrote this book, one of the tasks that I gave myself was to write in such a way that if any one of the 12 signs was contemplating suicide, that after they read their chapter, they wouldn't be.
Wow. That is so beautiful. And, I know that both of us have teenagers. And when I hear about young people taking their lives, I often have the thought, God, if they only knew that their life matters, that there is something so unique and wonderful about them. And we need what they're here to contribute. If they only knew these things, and there's the kinds of things that astrology has helped to reveal and really solidify within me. I have a question. I recently watched the movie Woodstock. It was awesome. And it was like so nostalgic. It like elicited so much in me. I'm like, wow, those kids had such a beautiful vision. They were really there, like in their hearts. They were there with like these lofty ideals, and they did it like for a weekend. How amazing is that? And the whole community rallied around them. And it was like, wow, that's really inspiring. And then I was sad because it was like all these bright-eyed kids that you would see in this documentary. It's like, how come that didn't last? Like, why couldn't we uphold that vision of what's possible? I'd love to hear your perspective, because you were in there. You were like, you were doing it. And why do you think that ideal from the 60s was unsustainable, at least between then and now? And do you think it is actually possible in this realm, in this third dimensional reality?
Yes, I do think it's possible. And I delve into that in the Aquarian chapter. There are a few reasons why I think it didn't last. And one of them was that there was a secret government operation to be sure that it didn't last. It's called Operation Mockingbird. You can look it up. The CIA decided that the idea of people getting together was dangerous to them, especially blacks and whites. So they set in operation a program where they They replaced media people with CIA agents. They put in hundreds of agents in the New York Times, on NBC, CBS network, in the news. And their instructions were to make people think that the powerful changes of the 1960s were just simply caused by too many drug hallucinations, that they weren't real. And it worked. Because if you talk to a lot of people today about what happened then, you'll often get that kind of take on it, rather than this powerful thing that could change everything.
Wow. Like,
Yeah.
I am, I mean, I was definitely hoodwinked by the messaging. I will definitely admit that, when I think of it, it's like, it's sort of that feeling of, well, yeah, it's easy to be all love and light when you're like drugged out and not on the earth. I feel like the 60s would have worked better if the drugs were such a focal point. But my other philosophy is that it was the light of what's possible with humanity without acknowledging the shadow.
And I think in the 60s, another reason why it didn't last was because it was a very adolescent movement. We knew what we were getting rid of, but we only had vague ideas of what we would replace it with. We hadn't grown up. We hadn't matured. So we were really good at pushing away. And that's how we've matured since then, a lot of us, and learned how to face shadows. Unfortunately, many of my peers, the baby boomers, have sold out, and they're not still living the dream. I never sold out. I've always been living that dream, just the dream that we are all in this together, and we need love to be the glue that unites us, no matter what the picture looks like. And we cannot settle for less. That's what was busting out all over in the 60s. But it does raise a lot of shadow, because the more you gain enlightenment, the more you become aware of how much darkness there is. And, one of the first things that happens when you awaken is realize how unawake you are. You didn't know that before you awakened. And if you deal with the shadow, then you can still follow the vision and bring it all the way down to earth, bring the stars down to earth.
Resonating deeply with everything that you're saying. I've experienced that too. A lot of people who had those lofty ideals, it's like they became cynical. It's almost like they believed that propaganda that was being spread, they probably internalized that. It's like, oh yeah, maybe it was just because we were high, or maybe it was just a childlike, innocent ideal that just isn't reality.
Yeah. And that's part of it. It's true. It was a childlike, it was an adolescent movement, but it had some beautiful open energy. People were so open to finding new ways. And we need that again, because we've become jaded as a culture, and the younger generation, unlike we were back then, doesn't have a lot to live for. They have a very uncertain future. And we need to believe again. We don't need all the excesses of the drugs, but we do need its willingness to believe that something beautiful might happen.
You're making me cry. Wow. Mm-hmm. Yes. It starts with each and every one of us. It's almost like you have to have the courage to believe that that's possible, and getting rid of the naysayer voices that are within us in order to really live that way. Not just believe it and think it and hope it and wish it, but live that way.
Absolutely. Which is why I say that sometimes music is the only thing that keeps me sane, because I go through talking with people all over the world, trying to drum up their faith and their belief. And then I get whacked with all the stuff that seems in the way of it. But then I pick up my guitar and start playing, especially some of the songs from back then, Cat Stevens songs, Beatles songs, and just all of a sudden the energy comes back into me again, because the music at least carried the message and the open vibe. And the music inspired, the Grateful Dead, who've inspired younger jam bands who still go off right into that vision. And So it didn't totally die from the world. It just went underground.
Does astrology inspire your music at all?
No, absolutely. In fact, for me, astrology is like music. I call it star jazz because I'm the kind of person, the day that I met my teacher, he said, if you're going to be an astrologer, you need to know there's a lot of bullshit in the field of astrology. But if you want to do it the real way, never think you know what Capricorn is. Always be willing to find out what it is all over again with each new Capricorn and all the other signs. And that became my mantra. And that's like jazz, because unlike classical music or rock music, with jazz, even if you've played the score of a song hundreds of times, you have to play it the next time as if it was brand new almost. That's how I look at the birth chart, which is some people have gotten 20 or 30 readings from me over the years. Even if I've looked at that chart before, in order to be jazz in that living moment, I have to see it all over again. Well, what is this version of Capricorn? Who is this being right there in front of me? What's going on in them? What are they all about? So for me, there's very little difference between songwriting and music playing and chart reading.
Star jazz. I love that. Mark, for people that are learning, like what you just said sounds very true, but it also could seem maybe a little frustrating because it's like, how do you actually learn astrology if it's always changing and never the same? And you can't really like take what you learn and apply it to people. What is that? How do you rectify those two paradoxes?
Yeah, you got to the trickiness of the art. The Ruby Heart of the Dragon, Sun Signs for Our Times, it's written both for someone who has no experience at all with astrology, maybe never even was interested in astrology. It's going to work for them, as well as professional astrologers. Stephanie Azaria wrote a beautiful endorsement. She said, I've been a professional astrologer for 50 years. I thought I knew just about all there was to know about the zodiac, but the Ruby Heart offers an entirely new perspective. And so it works for both because that's the way to do it. It took me many years to design my course in the College of Visionaries and Wizards because it is tricky to teach jazz. It's like teaching Zen. It's much easier to teach academics and math and history than to teach something that has magic in it. And to do justice to the earthy sides of astrology, as well as the magic, I poured all my artistry into this book. So this is the book for those people that you're talking about.
I cannot wait to order this book. I can't imagine that anyone out there isn't like, okay, tell me where to go. How do I get this? Is it Amazon? Like, how do we get your book?
Yeah, Amazon is the best place to get it right now because it'll boost all my ratings. The Ruby Heart of the Dragon, Sun Signs for Our Times. If they go to the rubyheartofthedragon.com, they can also take advantage of some special free offers with getting the book. But you can get it right now in print form, audiobook, and an ebook form. And if you read it and write reviews, I will love it because we only have 1 or 2 readers' reviews, even though we have some professional reviews. So the book was just released and it's all starting and the word is spreading. And I'm so thankful to you for having me on your show to where I can let people know about it.
Oh, I'm so honored to be able to share your work with everybody. It sounds like incredible work. I can't wait to read it. And yeah, everyone write your reviews. If you enjoy it, just write it in Amazon so that more people can get access to it. So the more reviews he gets, the more that we order through that platform, then they will recommend it to other people to read as well. And Astrology Hub gets nothing for this, by the way. So this is just we're just grateful for you, Mark. Thank you like I said in the beginning, thank you for dedicating your life to this work. To me, the world would be such an incredible place with amazing astrologers like you, just canvassing the lands, helping people remember who they are, helping people remember their brilliance and their beauty. And so thank you for doing that. And thank you for holding the vision for what's possible for humanity. I mean, we need people holding that line so that we can just continue to grow up into it. And it always inspires me to meet people like you. So thank you for doing your work and for helping so many people. It's awesome.
You're so welcome, Amanda. Thank you for the acknowledgement, helping people remember who they are. You got it.
Yeah, that's the jam right there. There's the star jazz. I love that word. I'm going to find a lot of different ways to use it, and I'm going to give you credit for it everywhere that I do. Okay, everybody. So go check out the Ruby Heart of the Dragon on Amazon, and let us know if you like this episode and would love to hear more from Mark. I would love to invite him back. So let us know your thoughts in the comments, and just thank you everybody for being here. Thank you so much for being a part of our community, and thank you for making astrology a part of your life. We will catch you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.